In my previous life, on the day Tong Min Da was taken back by the Queen Kai branch of the family, he did not take me with him. He only brought our son, Tong Tin, because he was the eldest grandson of the Tong family. He also brought along his white moonlight, Tham Mu Mu, because she looked exactly like the Tong family's youngest daughter who had died young. As for me, worn down by marriage and childbirth, I no longer carried the radiance of my early 20s. His mother suffered from mental illness. Every time she saw me, she screamed like a madwoman. So he said to me, "Hi, wait until my mother recovers. I'll come back to get you. I won't let Tiu Tin forget you." I waited. Year after year, they never came back. When Tiu Tin grew up, I finally couldn't endure it anymore and went to look for them. My son hooked his arm affectionately around Tham Mu Mu and looked at me with undisguised disgust. "Who are you? Why are you trying to ruin my family?" In this life, I decided to leave first. I would no longer cling to the wealth and glory of that father and son. From now on, our paths would be separated by wind and dust, with nothing to do with each other. On the day the Tong family, a prestigious clan in Tantan, arrived at my village, their long, luxurious convoy blocked the entire country road. They had come looking for the son who had gone missing for 6 years, my husband, Tong Min Da. My village was too remote. Over those 6 years, the Tong family had searched until they were nearly driven mad. They had even believed he was dead. Yet they still had not found this desolate place. When the village children ran over to spread the news, Tong Min Da was teaching our son. Tong Tin was practicing calligraphy. He paused, and a blot of ink spread across the paper. Tong Min Da remained focused. "Tiu Tin, what have I taught you? Writing characters is training the mind. Your mind must be calm." I knew that next, he would reclaim his identity and return to Tantan. After the Tong family's people left, Tong Min Da remained as composed as ever. The son the Tong family had devoted themselves to cultivating, despite losing his memory and staying in this rural village for several years, still carried the same bearing and temperament. And I was even calmer than he was. I still went up the mountain to gather mushrooms as usual. I ran into Aunt Wang on the way. She teased me, "Van Hai, you're about to follow Mr. Tong to the city and live a rich life. Why are you still going into the forest to pick mushrooms?" That day, Tong Min Da told his family that he needed time to pack and asked them to come back the next day to pick him up. He also said he would bring 2 people back with him. The villagers were all envious, saying my ancestors must be blessing me. They had forgotten that when Tong Min Da first drifted here with no memories, unable to farm or do any labor, I was the only one who took care of him like a child. The village was small. Him staying in my house brought me bad gossip. So we got married. Our wedding invited only a few neighbors. We handed out some red eggs. And that was considered enough ceremony. After marriage, we lived happily. Back then, he was my husband alone. Now he was about to leave. He should have taken me and our child with him. But I knew he wouldn't. In my previous life, Tong Min Da did indeed bring 2 people back to the Tong family, but I wasn't one of them. Thinking of this, I simply smiled at Aunt Wang. This year, the pine mushrooms were especially good. The money from selling them would be enough to help me leave this place and start a new life. When I returned home, Tham Mu Mu was teaching Tiu Tin English. She said, "You need to study hard. Kids your age in Tantan already speak several languages." Tong Tin studied earnestly. Tham Mu Mu smiled and gently patted his head. "Tiu Tin is really smart." "Nothing like." Tong Tin hugged her waist and said, "Thanks to Aunt Tham teaching me. If I were like my mom and only knew how to speak rustic dialects, I'd get laughed at in the city." Tong Min Da was reading. Hearing this, he only lifted his head, glanced over, and smiled gently. It was a warm, beautiful scene, one I had witnessed over 2 lifetimes. Tham Mu Mu was also from my village. Her father was abusive. Her mother died early. Later, relatives took her to the city to study. I didn't know why she had returned to the village. At first, I was very grateful to her. Because once when Tong Tin was being naughty and fell into the water, she had saved him. But after that, things slowly started to feel wrong. She came to my house and saw Tong Min Da standing straight-backed, one hand behind him, the other writing characters. His long, clean fingers moved the brush with elegant composure. She walked over and said, "Brother Tong, you're so learned. Sister-in-law is truly blessed." Tong Min Da often read astronomy and geography, poetry. I didn't understand at all. Between him and me, there were only summer heat and winter cold. But in Tham Mu Mu's words, I clearly heard the mockery directed at me. I could only stand there awkwardly. After that, she came to my house every few days and persistently urged Tong Minda to go teach at the village school. From then on, she called him Teacher Tong with exaggerated sweetness. Later, every time I brought meals over, I would see Tham Mew Mew sitting beside him. He would ladle out the chicken soup I had simmered all night and carefully pour it into her bowl. Tong Tin laughed happily. Mom, Aunt Tham likes your cooking the most. Yes, I raised that father and son. I woke up early to gather mushrooms and trade them for hens with neighbors. I toiled to clear land and grow vegetables behind the mountain, picking only the tender shoots, unwilling to eat them myself, only for all of it to be used to curry favor with someone else. In my previous life, I had shouted these words out in front of everyone. Tong Minda frowned, pressed his thin lips together, bent slightly, and apologized to Tham Mew Mew. Miss Tham, I'm sorry, my wife was rude, as if I were the one who had committed some unforgivable offense. Tong Tin was even more direct. If Mom doesn't let Aunt Tham eat, then I won't eat either. Tham Mew Mew, like a lady of the house, pulled Tong Tin to her side. Tiu Tin, what do I usually teach you? You can't talk to your mother like that. Tong Tin pouted. Sorry, Aunt Tham. Tham Mew Mew shielded Tong Tin protectively, her gaze on me calm and unflustered. In that moment, my husband and my son turned me into a woman completely abandoned. My heart broke beyond repair. Tham Mew Mew was born gentle and fair-skinned. I, on the other hand, spent my days climbing mountains to pick mushrooms and working in the fields, carrying a wild, rough air. After giving birth to Tong Tin, I had long lost the slender grace of a young girl. Standing together, they truly looked like a family of three, just like in my previous life. When Tham Mew Mew followed them back to the Tong family, no outsider ever doubted that she was not Tong Tin's biological mother. At first, Tong Tin called her sister Mew Mew. She laughed and said, "You should still change how you address me." Only later did I understand the small calculations hidden in her words. When Tong Minda saw me walk in carrying a bamboo basket, he stood up and deliberately stepped aside a little. Perhaps the smell of mud and earth on me offended his nose again. Seeing the basket full of wild mushrooms, he finally showed a hint of guilt. Why are you still doing such hard labor? We have money now. The rest of the sentence, he said very softly. In my previous life, after he left, I regularly received a sum of money, just enough to survive in the village. Going anywhere farther was impossible. I didn't explain anything. I only said I was idle and used it. After that, I picked up the needle and thread on the table and began sewing sachets. The mosquito-repellent grass inside only worked for about a week. Tong Tin's legs were already covered in red, swollen bites. For some reason, I no longer felt heartache like I did in my previous life. Tong Tin looked annoyed when he saw me sewing. When we go to the city, there won't be mosquitoes anymore. You don't need to make these things for us. That was right. The Tong family had never valued anything I made. In my previous life, when that black car drove away, I cried and stuffed Tong Tin's hands with many things. But all of them were thrown onto the road, not even making it out of the village. The old woman at the village head's house recognized them at a glance, brought them back, and looked at me with a mix of pity and mockery. I had always thought it was Tong Minda's mother's decision. Later, I specially went to the county town to buy a cell phone, hoping to keep in touch. Every time I video called, Tong Tin was extremely impatient. My horseback riding class is starting. Aunt Tham is calling me. I scraped together every bit of money, crossed mountains and rivers, and secretly went to his school to see him. He saw me, but ran straight to the car, afraid I would call his name in front of others. Watching that fleeing figure, I finally realized that it wasn't the sachet's scent that had faded. It was the human heart that had emptied out. From then on, I stopped looking for him, until he grew up. By then, years of hard labor had left me ill. The doctor said I didn't have much time left. I called Tong Minda. He was silent for a long time and only said, "I'll arrange a hospital for you." But I didn't want treatment. I only wanted to see my son one last time. So I put on my most beautiful clothes, used my remaining money to have my hair done, and went to his grand coming-of-age ceremony. Tiu Tin, don't you remember your mother? But he only held Tham Mew Mew's arm affectionately and looked at me with disgust. Who are you? Why are you trying to ruin my family? Tong Minda stood beside him, saying nothing. The cold calculation and contempt of a wealthy family were laid bare in all of them. In the midst of the extravagant banquet, I was like an old rat driven into a dark alley. In the end, a truck came barreling toward me and struck me down. Lying on the ground and staring up at the sky, tears silently slid from the corners of my eyes. Heaven had been unbearably cruel to me. Yet when I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day the Tong family came to the village to reclaim their son. This time, I would no longer be the foolish, pitiful woman I had been before. So I didn't struggle and persuade them like in my previous life, insisting on making sachets and pillow charms for them. I only said calmly, I know you don't like these. I promised to make them for Tiu Dao. Tong Tin was clearly a little confused. Although I was sometimes strict with him, I had always loved him deeply. Whenever there was anything good, I always brought it to him first. He pouted. Tiu Dao isn't a good kid. She doesn't respect teacher at all. Why would you make things for her? Tiu Dao was one of the few children in the village who didn't blindly worship Tham Mu Mu. Because of that, she was often isolated at school. In fact, she had never done anything hostile toward Tham Mu Mu. She simply liked me more. She once said, "You smell really nice. It's comforting." That was right. Once, Tong Minda had also rested his head against my neck and said I carried a scent full of vitality. But in the end, he still chose Tham Mu Mu, whose body was heavy with the smell of powder and cosmetics. A few days earlier, I had seen Tiu Dao's fair arms covered in swollen red mosquito bites. So I had promised to make her a few medicinal sachets to repel insects. What the father and son didn't need, others would still treasure. I calmly stitched each seam. I'll make things for whoever I want. Tong Tin was unhappy. You're really bad. I'm going to find Aunt Tham. She said she'd take me to the county to eat Western food and teach me how to use a knife and fork. He rolled his eyes, then added, Mom, you've never eaten Western food before, right? I didn't look up. I only replied lightly, No, I haven't. You can go. He angrily punched the pile of cotton, unable to understand where things had gone wrong. In the past, I was always jealous of Tham Mu Mu. Wherever she took Tong Tin, I would do everything I could to follow. When I gave birth to Tong Tin, I nearly lost my life. I clutched Tong Minda's hand and struggled to whisper, Save the child. In the years after that, I always believed children mattered more than husbands. But in the end, the one who hurt me the most was Tong Tin himself. After Tong Tin left, turning back to look at me 3 times along the way, Tong Minda finally walked over to me. Hi, are you angry with me? If you're upset, take it out on me. Don't drag the child into it. We're leaving early tomorrow morning. Don't make everyone unhappy. Unhappy? I felt a little dazed. In my previous life, from the moment they left, my life had known no happiness at all. And now he dared to tell me not to make everyone unhappy. That day was the same as in my previous life. Tong Minda's mother, despite her serious illness, traveled thousands of miles to see the son she had lost for many years. But the moment she saw me standing beside him, extreme disgust filled her face. She shrieked sharply, Monster, monster, get away. I froze. I knew I wasn't good looking, and that the Tong family wouldn't like me. But I never expected it to be this bad. The Tong family members only sighed and looked at Tong Minda. Ever since he went missing, his mother's mind had no longer been normal. Although Tong Minda hadn't recovered his memories, the bond between mother and son still made deep sorrow show on his face. What surprised everyone was that his mother liked Tham Mu Mu very much. She affectionately pulled her hand and said, Vinin, you're back. It turned out she had mistaken Tham Mu Mu for her youngest daughter who had died. After the Tong family left, Tong Minda said to me, Hi, you saw what my mother is like. She can't handle any stimulation. Wait until she recovers, and I'll come get you. I won't let Tiu Tin forget you. Using his mother as an excuse, he went along with the situation and added, I have to take Mu Mu with me. Tiu Tin needs someone familiar by his side. I'm afraid he won't adapt. In my previous life, I believed him, and I waited, year after year, but they never came back. Later, Tong Minda said, Van Hai, I can give you a large sum of money, but you can't be the lady of the Tong household. I went mad and screamed at him, saying I couldn't accept that. Then what about Tham Mu Mu? What was the difference between her background and mine? Years of resentment finally exploded. He said nothing, only looked at me with pity. But what could I do? Back then, because he had no legal status, we had never even registered our marriage. Later, I found out that Tham Mu Mu had a face identical to his mother's youngest daughter who had died in an accident. That was why Tong Minda was determined to bring her back. And that was why she so smoothly married into the Tong family. In that moment, my heart was in complete turmoil. So there really were people with such good fate. But why did all the suffering have to fall on me? My parents also died early, leaving me only a small piece of land. No matter how much I plowed it, I couldn't grow anything valuable. I could only go up the mountains to pick mushrooms and travel around doing sewing work just to scrape by. Picking up Tong Min Da meant one mouth became two. At first, he couldn't do anything. I even had to give up part of my vegetable plot to grow medicinal herbs to earn a little extra money. Sun and rain wore me down day after day. Many people had forgotten that when I was young, I was once known as a beauty across 10 miles and 8 villages, more beautiful than Tham Mu Mu. But later, when I met her again, I did feel inferior. She curled her hair fashionably, wore the latest branded clothes, and carried herself with elegance, just like a refined young lady, perfectly matched with Tong Min Da. She knew I had gone to Tong Tin's school to look for him. So she deliberately came to see me. When she looked at me, her eyes were full of arrogance. If others knew that Tiu Tin's mother was someone like you, everyone would laugh at him. Brother Tong married you back then only because he was forced. From beginning to end, he never had a choice. You should know your place and get out of a world that doesn't belong to you. Tong Tin's attitude proved she was right. I suddenly remembered when Tong Min Da proposed to me. There didn't seem to be any smile in his eyes. And when he named Tong Tin, he said, "This place is too backward. I hope Tiu Tin can fly freely, like in the universe." I began to wonder, did I risk my reputation to save Tong Min Da? Risk my life to give birth to Tong Tin, only to be trampled on by that father and son over and over again? So from then on, I cut off all contact with them, and they seemed to have completely forgotten me as well, until I was about to die. It turned out that only when life and death separated us did we truly never meet again. In my previous life, I exhausted all my devotion and all my foolishness. In this life, I wanted to live for myself. I was just an interlude in Tong Min Da's life, and he could just as well be nothing more than an accident in mine. On the day they were preparing to leave, Tong Min Da handed me a grasshopper woven from grass. During the days when we were still happy together, whenever I got angry, he would make one of these to coax me. I once treasured them like jewels, collecting a whole box full, but now, I didn't reach out to take it. Tong Min Da didn't seem to care and smiled faintly. "We're leaving today. Are you still angry?" In the past, I often got angry with him over Tham Mu Mu. He chatted with her intimately. And when I asked, he always just said, "You wouldn't understand." I wasn't willing to accept that. If I didn't understand, he could teach me, but Tong Min Da refused. "I'm already exhausted from teaching at school. Do I have to continue when I get home?" I pinched pennies and bought the book they often mentioned, In Search of Lost Time by Proust. But after 3 pages, I was already sleepy. I couldn't understand why they liked things like that. Tong Min Da would laugh, pat my head, hand me a grasshopper, and say, "Go play," as if he were coaxing a child, and I once thought that was love. Many years later, when I looked back, I finally understood that he had never truly loved me. That was why he didn't want to spend any effort on me. A grasshopper took only a minute to weave. Teaching me to read a book would have taken who knew how many days and months. Later, I read many books on my own and discovered it really wasn't that difficult after all. So in this life, I would no longer treasure his grasshoppers. What I wanted to learn, I would learn myself. Seeing that I still didn't take it, Tong Min Da looked slightly surprised. In that moment of silence, a car horn sounded outside the courtyard. The Tong family had arrived. Tong Min Da sighed. "Give them to me." I froze. "Give what?" he said. "The pillow sachets aren't convenient to carry. But the small sachets can take 2. I know you made a lot. Tiu Dao definitely won't use them all." I suddenly understood. So he still thought I was just being stubborn with my words. I laughed, shook my head, and said, "There aren't any left. Not even one. I sold the extras. My embroidery skills were excellent. On my mother's side, there had once been a famous embroiderer. When she was alive, she passed her skills down to me. In fact, the sachets I made were very popular. It was just that farm work usually kept me too busy to make many. Every time I managed to make a few, I gave them all to that father and son." Tong Min Da kept looking at me, clearly not believing what I said, until Tong Tin happily pulled Tham Mu Mu inside. "Dad, let's go." Tham Mu Mu took out a handkerchief and wiped his sweat. "Look at you. You're so happy you're sweating already." Tong Min Da scooped him up in one motion. Come on, say goodbye to your mom. Tong Tin was still sulking. He turned his head away and refused to look at me. My gaze fixed on that handkerchief. And suddenly I spoke. Give it back to me. Tham Mew Mew paused. What? I embroidered that handkerchief. Give it back. She laughed. A hint of disdain in her expression. Taking something like this to the city would only get people laughed at anyway. If Sister Van Hai treasures it so much, then here. Back then, when she had saved Tong Tin, I had nothing valuable to give in return. All I could offer was this handkerchief. The pair of butterflies embroidered on it were praised by everyone who saw them. Vivid as if alive, their wings shimmered and changed color in the light. I had once sold a precious ginseng root just to buy the finest thread. Disgust showed clearly on Tong Tin's face. That expression, I had seen it far too many times. In both this life and the last. I knew he felt that I embarrassed him. That father and son had always been generous. If they borrowed something, they would feel embarrassed asking for it back. Tong Tin treated his friends to candy. Tong Min Da always helped poor students pay their tuition. Only I counted every coin, splitting each dollar in two and calculating down to the smallest detail. Even arguing red-faced with others over a few cents from selling eggs. Tham Mew Mew was different. She spoke gently and never argued with anyone. She spent her salary pleasing Tong Tin, buying him things I never allowed. Over time, it was only natural that Tong Tin grew closer to her. Every time I showed displeasure toward Tham Mew Mew, Tong Min Da would step in to defend her. When Tong Tin had a stomachache, I forbade him from eating ice cream. Tham Mew Mew secretly bought it for him anyway. As expected, he ended up with severe diarrhea, nearly dehydrated. Tham Mew Mew cried until her eyes were red. It's my fault. I was just about to scold her when Tong Min Da spoke first. Mew Mew only meant well. Don't blame her. From that, it was clear, they were on the same side. My careful calculations suddenly seemed utterly meaningless. Tong Min Da was born into wealth. Following him meant never having to calculate like I did. No wonder he didn't want to take me with him. When they reached the gate, Tong Min Da suddenly noticed that all the chickens and ducks in the yard were gone. Where did all the poultry go? Didn't you treasure them the most? I did treasure them. Eggs could be sold for money. They could help our family eat more meat. But Tong Min Da didn't like them. The elegance in his bones made him unable to tolerate the smell of manure. He preferred the kind of courtyard Tham Mew Mew had, flowers and plants. A grape trellis, sitting in the shade in summer to drink tea and feel the breeze. Even picking grapes to make wine. That was why, whenever they had time, they chose to stay there instead. I said calmly, I sold them. I was about to leave. Of course I had to settle everything. No one in this village liked me anyway. And I didn't want to stay a moment longer. In my previous life, I didn't dare to leave because I was afraid they wouldn't be able to find me. But this time I understood, they were never going to look for me. And they never truly cared. Tong Min Da chuckled softly. The smile strange, tinged with mockery. That makes sense. I gave you so much money, you don't need to raise those things anymore. 1 million is enough for you to buy a house in town. Urged by Tong Tin, they finally got into the car. Tong Tin still didn't say a word of farewell to me. Perhaps there really was nothing left to say. In this lifetime, we would likely never meet again. Tong Min Da handed me a cell phone. If you miss us, you can call. In my previous life, he hadn't left me anything at all. This time, my restrained, teary demeanor instead made him more proactive. But I would never call. I wouldn't take that money either. From now on, with mountains high and rivers long between us, we would each let go, with no promise of meeting again. In this life, I would not let myself be entangled in any relationship with them ever again. When the convoy disappeared completely along the mountain road, I picked up my luggage and turned back to look at my house one last time. Tham Van Hai, from now on, you have to live your life all over again. On the first night after Tong Min Da returned to the Tong family home, he felt a strange, familiar sensation. Lying on the large, soft bed, he unconsciously thought of the simple wooden bed in the Tham family village. The mosquito net that had darkened with age, and the incessant buzzing of mosquitoes. He tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. Later, when Tham Van Hai used herbs to make mosquito-repellent sachets, things finally improved. Now, the room was perfectly air-conditioned, and there was a faint, subtle fragrance in the air, the scent he once liked the most. Tong Min Da thought he would sleep very well that night, but by midnight, he was still tossing and turning, unable to drift off. Something was missing. Was it the herbal smell? It seemed so. Without it, the sandalwood fragrance in the room suddenly felt cloying. He was almost awake the entire night. Early the next morning, Tong Min Da looked somewhat exhausted. Breakfast at the Tong household was lavish. Since no one was sure of everyone's preferences, both Chinese and Western dishes were fully prepared. Tong Tin held a fork and stabbed noisily at the fish on his plate. Seeing this, Tong Min Da's father spoke in a slightly stern tone. Tiu Tin, eat properly. Tong Tin felt a little wronged. In the past, his mother would always help him pick out the best pieces. Seeing this, Tham Miu Miu was about to reach out to help him, but she was stopped. He's not little anymore. He should do it himself. Then came a light sigh. What kind of child can a rural woman really raise? Hearing this, Tham Miu Miu put down her fork. Tong Tin felt even more wronged. In the past, when his mother didn't allow Tham Miu Miu to take care of him, Tham Miu Miu never listened. Now, he keenly sensed that his grandfather didn't seem to like him very much. Aunt Tham also wasn't the same as before. He suddenly found himself missing his mother a little. A child's thoughts were simple. After breakfast, he said to Tong Min Da that he wanted to call his mom. Tong Min Da thought for a moment, then dialed Tham Van Hai's number, but no one answered. He forced a smile. Maybe your mom is busy. We'll call again later. But very quickly, Tong Tin no longer even had the chance to call. His schedule was packed tight. The old master of the Tong family was dissatisfied with the performance of this eldest grandson and felt he still had much to learn. An entire day passed. Tong Tin was exhausted, both physically and mentally, from constantly correcting his posture. His whole body ached. After showering and lying on the bed, he whined to his father. Dad, my legs hurt so much. Rub them for me. But Tong Min Da rubbed the wrong spots. And it didn't feel good at all. Helpless, Tong Tin said, Dad, call Aunt Tham to help me. Then he shook his head. She doesn't know how either. Only mom knows. Tong Min Da was momentarily at a loss. Tong Tin rolled his eyes and said, Dad, tell me a story. If you tell a story, it won't hurt as much. Before, when I had a fever, Mom would hold me and tell stories to lull me to sleep. Tong Min Da stroked his head. What story do you want to hear? I want to hear the story of you and Mom. Me and Tham Van Hai? It was actually a very ordinary story. Back then, he went mountain climbing and accidentally fell into a ravine. Tham Van Hai saved him and hired a vehicle to take him back to the Tham family village more than 100 miles away. His leg was broken. He couldn't remember who he was. Nor did he have anywhere to go. So he followed her home. Tham Van Hai named him and knew. She scolded him while massaging and performing acupuncture on him every day. And in the end, she cured his leg. Her skills were excellent. She could turn ordinary wild vegetables into dishes rich in flavor. He was grateful to her and felt she was kind, good-hearted, and also pretty. Later, gossip spread through the village. People said that with Tham Van Hai keeping a man like that in her home, who would dare marry her in the future? It was no different from picking up discarded trash. But at that time, he couldn't even carry a bucket of water. Keeping him brought no benefit. Tham Van Hai got angry. He's already in such a miserable state. And you're still gossiping? He's educated and speaks beautifully. If I want to support him, so what? Tong Min Da grew angry as well. In a moment of impulse, he proposed to her. But as soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted it. Vaguely, he felt that sooner or later, he would leave this place. But when he saw the flush on Tham Van Hai's cheeks, he suddenly no longer regretted it. He thought it didn't matter. When the time came, he would take her with him. Later, after Tham Van Hai gave birth to Tong Tin, her slender figure and smooth skin were gone. Clear stretch marks appeared on her belly. She was no longer the petite, graceful girl she had been before marriage. She could shout and argue with others over a few coins. She gradually became no different from the coarse women of the village. He began to feel disgust toward her. And then Tham Miu Miu entered his world. At times, he even couldn't help thinking how wonderful it would have been if the one who saved him back then had been Tham Miu Miu instead. He felt that Tham Van Hai didn't know how to raise a child. She never cared about Tong Tin's studies and was only strict when he caused trouble. Otherwise, she spoiled him too much. He knew Tham Van Hai wasn't fit to teach the eldest grandson of the Tong family, much less to be the matriarch of the clan. So he used his mother as an excuse and cowardly abandoned Tham Van Hai, taking Tham Miu Miu with him when he left. He believed Tham Miu Miu deserved to step out of that mountain. But if this time Tong Tin hadn't stirred up those old memories, he would have almost forgotten that Tham Van Hai had once been a girl people genuinely liked. Thinking of this, his gaze became firm. He said to Tong Tin, "In a few days, we'll go back to visit your mom." Yet when they finally managed to arrange the time to return, they couldn't find Tham Van Hai. The villagers said, "The day you left was the same day she left the village. We even thought she went to Tan Ton to look for you. The cell phone and bank card you left her were carefully placed under her pillow." He suddenly woke up to the truth. Tham Van Hai had loved him, yet had never asked for anything. Tong Tin began to panic. Where is mom? Why isn't mom here? Tong Min Da was momentarily dazed. He replayed Tham Van Hai's reaction from a few days earlier, and a vague sense of panic rose in his chest. He thought she must really be angry this time. But he still comforted Tong Tin, saying that your mom is just upset. It's fine, she'll come back in a few days. When that happens, you have to say some nice things to her. Tong Tin nodded vigorously. Tham Van Hai had run away from home once before. That time, it was because he and Tham Mew Mew had talked too late into the night and accidentally fell asleep outside in the courtyard. Tham Van Hai cried and made a huge scene. For the first time, he scolded her in an extremely stern tone. "You're making such a fuss. What will people think about Mew Mew?" Tham Van Hai froze. That sentence hurt more than a slap. She turned around and ran straight into the mountains, staying there all night, but before long, she came back on her own. With a forced smile, she crept up to him cautiously. "I was wrong. I believe there's nothing between you and her." He didn't comfort her, didn't go looking for her either. He only smiled indifferently and said, "She'll come back on her own." This time was the same. He left his phone number with the neighbors and told them to call him if Tham Van Hai returned. But he waited, and still didn't receive the call he wanted most. After leaving Tham village, I traveled through many places and finally settled in a small fishing village by the sea. I rented a small room and began living life on my own terms, focusing entirely on embroidery. This fishing village was far more open-minded than Tham village. Some people liked my embroidery. After buying it, they even resold it elsewhere. I was surprised and delighted. I began again with the things I was best at, scent sachets and herbal pillows. They sold even better. Once I started earning money, I spent it all on myself. In my previous life, when I went to the city, I once heard women there say, "Once a woman has money, she should know how to treat herself." I bought rare medicinal ingredients to make skincare products. The formula was a family secret from my father, hidden at the bottom of a chest. Before, I couldn't afford those ingredients, and I'd never thought of using them on myself. My skin gradually became fairer and smoother. I became a walking advertisement. Women from the village came to ask me about it. "Something this good, you can't keep it all to yourself. We'll buy it, we'll buy it." My reputation slowly spread. People from neighboring villages and even the town came looking for me. With the money I earned, I rented a larger compound to use as a workshop and renovated a few rooms into a homestay. I planted many flowers. When they bloomed in a riot of colors, it was breathtaking. My life kept getting better. Then one day, a guest from Tan Ton arrived. He said he was the vice president of a cosmetics brand under the Tong Group and wanted to buy the patent for my formula. The man in front of me introduced himself fluently and confidently. I was a little stunned. His eyebrows and eyes looked very much like Tong Min Da's. He was Tong Min Da's cousin, named Tong Min Ton. I immediately refused. I didn't want any connection with the Tong Group anymore. Tong Min Ton kept pestering me and eventually managed to stay. "Sister, please take pity on me. If I don't sign this contract, my dad will cut off all my cards." And so he stayed for half a month. Unexpectedly, he even began pursuing me. Without changing my expression, I told him, "My husband and child were both cursed to death by me. Haven't you heard?" Back then, many people in the village wanted to set me up on blind dates. In my panic, I blurted that out, and they finally gave up the idea. I didn't expect Tong Min Ton's eyes to light up. "I have a tough fate," he said. I couldn't drive him away, so I let him be. Anyway, he was free labor. One day, during a video call, he spoke hesitantly. "Cousin, I still have something to handle over here. I'll come back once it's done." I accidentally appeared in his camera frame. The other end of the line went completely silent. After a moment, Tong Min Da's cold voice rang out. "Tham Van Hai, you've made me search so hard for you." The next day, I met Tong Min Da and his son again. The moment he saw me, Tong Tin ran over and hugged me tightly. "Mom, We finally found you. Before, he'd only ever been that close to Tham Mew Mew. Tong Min Da's expression remained calm. He looked at me with confidence. It's been a year, Tham Van Hai. I've been looking for you for a whole year. Are you done being angry? Of course it was hard to find me. They didn't even have a single photo of me. Once, on my birthday, I wanted to go to the county town to take a family photo. But no one in the family was willing to go with me. I gently pried Tong Tin's hands off me. You've got the wrong person. A layer of mist seemed to cover Tong Tin's eyes. Mom, don't you want me anymore? Tong Min Da grew irritated. He thinks about you every day. Sometimes he even dreams about you and wakes up crying. Tham Van Hai, he's your biological child. How can you be so heartless? Heartless? When it comes to being heartless, how could I ever compare to them? In my previous life, the last time I saw them was when they watched me leave in humiliation. Coldly, without anyone saying a word for me. I was reborn in this life to live for myself. Tong Min Ton suddenly cut in. She's Tham Van Hai, the sister-in-law cousin's been looking for all year. He blurted out, how is that possible? She said her husband and child were both cursed to death by her. Tong Min Da's face darkened at those words. After learning the whole story, Tong Min Ton began playing defense. If that's the case, doesn't that mean you two are just not meant to be? He patted Tong Min Da's shoulder. Cousin, if fate isn't there, don't force it. Tong Min Da shot him a cold glance. Don't you want that Panamera anymore? Tong Min Ton hesitated, then clenched his teeth. Cars can always be bought again. But if you lose your wife, you can't always win her back. That sentence hit Tong Min Da right where it hurt. He roared in anger. She's your sister-in-law. Tong Min Ton raised his chin. Then why is she living here alone? Enough. I finally spoke to stop this ridiculous farce. Both of you, get out. Tong Min Ton was naturally unwilling. But he was forcibly dragged away by Tong Min Da. Still, Tong Min Da really did leave Tong Tin behind. Before leaving, he said, wait for me, I'll come back. After he left, Tong Tin and I stared at each other. Big eyes against big eyes. The boy was clearly very happy, chattering non-stop about everything that had happened over the past year. He said the schoolwork was heavy, and any mistake meant being hit on the hands. He said Tham Mew Mew didn't care about him much, only about pleasing Madame Tong. He said he missed me terribly. In the end, it turned out he missed me because his life wasn't good. At his core, he was still selfish, just like in my previous life. Back then, Tong Tin probably didn't live well either. But Tong Min Da had never once thought of bringing him to look for me. So he gradually adapted to life in the Tong household. In truth, Tham Mew Mew's choice wasn't wrong. Madame Tong's status was very important. Tong Min Da always felt guilty toward her. And his father doted on his wife even more. In my previous life, Tham Mew Mew had relied on this to climb up. She controlled things bit by bit, slowly softening the hearts of the father and son of the Tong family. It was a pity that in this life, my departure left Tong Min Da burdened with constant guilt, leading to the current outcome. No matter what, the boy was still my child. I couldn't drive him away. Tong Tin said cheerfully, I want to eat the red bean dessert you make. Mom, I only ordered takeout for him. Disappointment was written all over his face. I said flatly, if you don't eat, then go hungry and wait for your dad to come pick you up. He could only eat his food resentfully, spoon by spoon. 2 days later, Tong Min Da rushed back. He looked exhausted but a little excited. Van Hai, I'm not leaving anymore. Our whole family will live here for a while. Just like before, I didn't let him into the house. I pushed Tong Tin out and shoved both of them outside the door. No rooms left. Sorry. They stood outside for a long time, still unwilling to leave. In my previous life, on the day they left, I had been the same, standing there for a long time. Until their car disappeared completely. Before turning back. Back then, I was always the one waiting. The one begging. Now they finally understood what it felt like to wait for someone who would never come. But Tong Min Da still refused to leave. He casually rented a place nearby. On weekdays, I opened classes teaching how to make scent sachets. They came to tag along and learn. Both of them studied seriously, making the little sachets they had once looked down on. From time to time, when I looked up, I would catch Tong Min Da staring at me in a daze. I knew why I looked beautiful wearing a cheongsam while making sachets. Otherwise, Tong Min Ton wouldn't have fallen for a rural woman older than himself, even if his pursuit also involved cars and Li Yi. I didn't care about them. I treated them as nothing more than passers-by. Half a month later, Tham Miu Miu suddenly showed up. She was dressed head to toe in luxury brands. Just like in my previous life. When she saw me, she froze for a moment before saying, "Van Hai, you've changed so much." Then she added with a hint of mockery, "No wonder you managed to lure Brother Tong so thoroughly that he won't even go home anymore. Doesn't even care about the company." At that moment, Tong Min Da happened to hear her. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Tham Miu Miu immediately put on a pitiful expression. "Brother Tong, if you don't go back, Auntie's illness has relapsed again." Tong Min Da replied coldly, "It's enough for you to stay by her side. Just play Tong Vin in properly." Over the past year, everything Tham Miu Miu had done had completely worn away what little affection Tong Min Da still had for her. Her expression grew ugly. Being Tong Vin and meant being Tong Min Da's younger sister. She could only stay by Madame Tong's side when the illness flared up. Playing that role, once Madame Tong recovered, she would immediately become an irrelevant outsider. Only by becoming Tong Min Da's wife, by becoming Tong Tin's mother, could she stay in the Tong family forever, having risen from poverty to wealth only to fall back to nothing. Tham Miu Miu couldn't accept it. She suddenly turned around and knelt in front of me, her voice choked with sobs. "Sister Van Hai, please spare Brother Tong. Because of you, he's had huge fights with his family. If he can't bring you home, he's determined not to go back at all." Uncle was so angry his blood pressure shot up. Auntie couldn't take the shock either. And little Ton has been causing trouble non-stop. I found it ridiculous. Had I not run far enough already? They were the ones who deliberately came here. No matter how much I tried to drive them away, they wouldn't leave. They were the ones who shattered my peaceful, comfortable life. Yet in the end it somehow became me refusing to let him go. I frowned and looked at Tong Min Da. "If you don't leave, I'll sell the patent to Van Nhu." Tong Min Da stiffened. Van Nhu was the Tong family's biggest competitor in the cosmetics industry. It was precisely because competition had grown so fierce it reached a bottleneck that the Tong family wanted a new direction. Turned their eyes to traditional Chinese medicinal cosmetics. And traveled thousands of miles to find me. Tong Min Da knew I meant it. The days we'd spent together were enough for him to realize that I no longer had any feelings for him. If even Tong Tin couldn't win much of my affection, there was no way I would care about the Tong family's interests. In the end, Tong Min Da conceded. It was as if all his strength had been drained away. This was the first time across 2 lifetimes that I'd seen his back no longer straight. "Do you hate me that much?" he asked. I shook my head. "I did hate you before. In my previous life, when I was dying, I once thought that if I ever met him again, I absolutely wouldn't save him. Not kicking him while he was down would already be showing mercy for old time's sake. But over the past year, I had focused on my own work and taken care of myself. Growing better day by day. And I realized there was nothing left to hate. I rarely even thought of them anymore. Because I no longer loved him. Hate isn't the opposite of love, forgetting is." Tong Min Da decided to leave. Tong Tin cried, clinging to me and refusing to go. He probably couldn't understand why the mother who loved him most suddenly didn't want him anymore. I still couldn't let go of my previous life. The scene of him refusing to acknowledge me and even calling security to throw me out lingered in my mind. He cried until he could barely breathe. In the end, my heart softened, and I reached out to hold him. "Go back with your dad. When summer vacation comes, you can come again." But he was still uneasy. "What if I come then and you've left again?" I hooked my little finger with his. "I won't. Once we've pinky promised, I won't change my mind." Tong Min Da looked at me and said, "Thank you." Finally, he added, "Van Hai, I won't give up." After returning, Tong Min Da finally made up his mind to send Tham Miu Miu away. She was stunned. "Then what about Auntie?" I've asked the doctor. Her condition has improved a lot. The illness in her heart was caused by me. Now I'll be the one staying by her side. Tham Miu Miu cried like rain. "If I leave alone, what am I supposed to do?" Tong Min Da's gaze was deep. People shouldn't covet things that don't belong to them. Tham Miu Miu regretted it. If she'd known that wretched Tham Van Hai could change so much, become so captivating that Tong Min Da would turn back, she would have acknowledged Madame Tong as her adoptive mother long ago. In fact, old Master Tong had once mentioned it. But now it was too late for regret. Back then, all she'd thought about was becoming Madame Tong. This time, Tong Min Da was truly resolute. Old Master Tong disliked Tham Van Hai and wanted Tong Min Da to marry someone of equal status. capable and shrewd. For the first time, Tong Min Da defied him. He knelt in the ancestral hall for 3 days and 3 nights until he collapsed unconscious. The Tong family didn't want to lose the outstanding heir they had only just recovered. So they had no choice but to let it be. When he woke up, Tong Min Tan looked at him with a complicated expression. Will she follow you back to the Tong family? Tong Min Da shook his head. Then do you think I deserve it? He said calmly. I have to prepare for every possibility. Over the past year, whenever he thought of Tham Van Hai, all he remembered were her good sides. In fact, before Tong Tin was born, they'd once had a period of genuine happiness. He had relied heavily on Tham Van Hai. He truly had loved her. He drowned in those repeating memories until he was forced to admit that he had fallen in love with Tham Van Hai all over again. He didn't know whether she would ever forgive him. But in the end, life is decided by people themselves. I stayed in that small fishing village. Whenever he had time, Tong Min Da would bring Tong Tin to see me. I no longer chased them away. But I didn't treat them warmly either. Whether they liked me for who I was or for the halo I now carried, I didn't know. My heart had died in my previous life, it couldn't warm up again. Tong Min Da learned how to cook, copying the dishes I used to make and cooking for us. Tong Tin no longer found me annoying. Instead, he asked me many questions. Just like the way he used to cling to Tham Miu Miu. He said he'd seen me on TV. And his classmates all said his mom was beautiful. That undisguised vanity, seemingly without malice, always left my heart in turmoil. I couldn't help but recall his cold, defiant look from my previous life. Tong Tin said Tham Miu Miu had already left. The person the Tong family had been waiting for to become the lady of the house, only I remained. I suddenly remembered my previous life and couldn't help asking him, do you really think I could do well as the matriarch of the Tong family? He laughed. Whatever kind of person mom is, that's exactly what the Tong family's matriarch will be like. When a man loves, he truly can make people intoxicated. In my previous life, it was because of that little bit of sweetness that I lived through so many years. Tham Miu Miu had grown used to a luxurious life and could no longer return to that small village. I heard she latched onto a wealthy man over 50, was stripped naked in the street by his wife, and then drifted to someone else. As for me, I continued living my ordinary life, maintaining a distant, Dan relationship with them. This place of ours was too remote. But I still sold the patent rights to the Tong group in the form of profit sharing. Money is money. Who doesn't want to earn it? Tong Min Da never remarried. In his home and his office, photos of me were hung everywhere. The entire city of Tan knew that I was his only wife. Tong Tin often called me. Sometimes I was busy and didn't answer. And he didn't dare get angry. Many years passed before his coming-of-age ceremony. They came together to pick me up. Tong Tin seemed uncertain, carefully pleading with me. Mom, you haven't come back for so many years. We've followed all your wishes. But this is my coming-of-age ceremony. I suddenly recalled my previous life. Emotions vague and hard to describe. In the end, I still returned to Tan Ton with them. Because I came, this banquet was even more grand than in my previous life. Everyone rushed to toast the rare appearance of the Tong family's lady of the house. Memories of my past life intertwined with the present. I curved my lips into a faint smile. I'd said it before, women must live for themselves their entire lives. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to China Story Tales, and stay tuned for more stories.